Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another DataBytes. Hard to believe that we're in episode 7 already. And our goal is to get to 30,000 viewers. We beat 20,000 viewers last week, believe it or not. Apparently, people have way too much time on their hands to watch videos. But we also appreciate the feedback we've got. We're really excited about it. It is 5:30 a.m. in Washington, where Mr. Chris Moriarty is sitting. And it's about an hour after that in Boise, Idaho, where Mr. Baumgartner is sitting. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling, and we'll try to keep those guys awake as we roll through. Guys, let's jump into it here. Normal agenda, the normal flow that we go through. We're going to try to do a shorter video today. And Jason, walk us through kind of the national look and how you saw the week unfolding.
Yeah, so another increase. Last week we went up 29% from week over week. This year, another 10.2% increase. So fantastic progress. That gap now, week 19 gap, represents only about 12% of down from where we were this time last year. So really significant to continue to see. We were seeing 10, 11, 12% increases. Then we had the 29% jump. Now we're back up to the 10%. But it's still trending positive. Majority of states are at or above where they were in 2019. And there's a handful of laggards that are still trending up. And we'll talk about those a little later.
Very, very good. It's interesting. You can actually see that, orange being 2020, that sometime in the very near future, that orange could get past the blue, especially if we go up against, we'll call it a bad weather week in 2019 on the blue line. You mentioned some of those states. Chris, kind of walk us through what we see and kind of walk us into the weather effect, if you would.
Absolutely. This is probably as close as I get to knowing what an owner feels like, as I'm piecing through each individual state, and you start to see states that have been, up for a few weeks, and you start to see a little bit of either a correction or a downtrend. When you're looking at anything singly, you sort of invent your own narrative. But when we put it all together collectively, you can start to clearly see this pattern emerge. And there's a big difference between things that are happening and things that are happening to you. And we make different sort of behavioral and emotional reactions to those things. So as we put this out, you saw some states that were historically trudging along that just really sprung to life: Maine, Washington. And then you saw this very clear swath of states that had a pullback. But it didn't take a degree in statistics to realize something was going on there. So as we looked back to a couple of key days, specifically Tuesday and Saturday, remember what we have discovered in terms of the new patterns. In a lot of parts, Tuesday is the new Saturday. And in other places, Saturday is still a dominant wash volume day. And as you looked at that, really the explanation for that for the number shift really became quite evident. It wasn't a pullback. It wasn't a correction. It was specifically just related to inclement weather.
Here we see an overlay of those in both Tuesday and Saturday. If you look at the weather maps, Tuesday and Saturday had a very similar portion of the country that was affected on those two bad days. So we'll just overlay that here. We'll do it in a couple of different shades. So you can, to say there's a clear delineation would be an understatement. You can also see, boy, some of the states were obviously hit a lot harder.
Well, in Vermont specifically, because I thought, well, is that an outlier? Like, is something happening specifically in Vermont that weather's not going to explain? And then when you look at one of those weather maps specifically, there's a lovely little pocket of weather just sitting directly over Vermont. Yep. So the rationale stayed there. And again, when you're looking for patterns, it's an exclusion game. What can I push off the table as an explanatory variable for what's happening here? And we didn't have to look too far to realize, why we were seeing what we were seeing this week.
I made the comment last week. One of the positives is we're back to our old problems. I believe, Chris, you said that last week. Mm-hmm. When you look at the expenditures and the credit card processing and everything else, I'm going to try to, there we go, move our picture out of the way here. You see that, again, we talked about last week, the recharge was really, really fantastic for May 1st back into the normal range. But you also see, even coming off of that, we put a blue line in there. When you look at for 1,000 sites that we pick, we're very much in the normal range for February and even March. into COVID. So I think we're getting back into normal patterns. So we're really excited to see some return to normalcy. And by the way, some of those dips you see, Chris, correlate perfectly with your weather map. So it's not just swash volume, it's also the impact on the dollars as well. And then closures, we've been looking at closures to give everybody an idea of how things are helping or how things are improving. At this time last month in April, over 13,000 closed days have occurred. Now we're under 5,000. Yesterday specifically, which would have been the 13th, we actually had about 300 closed versus 1,300 closed last month. So you're seeing that trend improve, and also the dips that we do have in the closed recently. Again, that really aligns with the weather that we saw from the previous map. Jason, walk us through some of the states.
Absolutely. Here are some states that have done really well. And I look at a state like Hawaii that had really was at 0 washes and then just bounced right back up. I mean, a really V-shaped recovery into normal ranges within 1 or 2 weeks. And then you see a state like California who also struggled, and then solid week over week over week over week over week increases, and then back in the normal range. Texas, Ohio, I love Ohio's steady growth. So this is what you want to see, and this is what a majority of the states are showing right now. I picked these 4 because they were a little bit more dramatic looking, but really 42 of the states are showing that they're right at or close to normal ranges, which is fantastic. And then these laggard states, really they're all trending upward as well, with the exception of, really Massachusetts, who's still kind of struggling with that state to be able to be open, and a state like Wisconsin. But you look at New Jersey, Washington had a really good weather week. New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland was able to bounce back and shoot up really quickly.
Go back and look at last week's episode. We called that one.
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The nice thing about this is it. These are the 8 states that are not performing as well as the other 42 and represent that 12.2% national gap. So we've really started to narrow it down into a handful of states that are trending in the right direction. However, there's still a little bit of a gap.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if think about where we were, Chris and Jason, 4 or 5 weeks ago, if you'd have told us in a month that our laggard states would all have trended up for 2 weeks in a row, we'd actually feel pretty good. Some of these are only 1 weekend, but a lot of these are 2, 3, 4 weeks in. It's just gradual. So I think it's it points to a good future, of course, depending on weather. Chris, every week you talk about the sentiment. Give us an update.
Well, and this is, again, it's always the thing that concerns me most, because facts and figures are great, but that's not what drives behavior. The way we feel, and especially as it relates to the safety and the confidence to go out and sort of resume our lives on any level, is going to manifest itself in the bottom line of the folks we work with more than anything. So we saw, if you've been watching over the weeks, everyone started off in this thing, positive. It was a bad situation, but we were banding together. Then you saw, as that confusion and uncertainty increased, you really saw people, this whole thing just really shift blue. And that made me very, very nervous. But now, as states have started to at least announce some sort of inception-based phase rollout, a phase within a phase within a phase, seemingly, at least people are knowing that the end, it is the beginning of the end. And beyond that, I think what we're seeing, and certainly not from a political standpoint, but from just a mass psychology standpoint, people are just starting to make their own decisions, and sort of resuming their lives as they see fit. And like we talked about, looking locally, looking out your window, because despite the numbers in terms of the pandemic and everything else trending in whatever way that they are, the news certainly hasn't let off the gas on the crisis and chaotic feeling. And so as more and more as our sites can focus on the realities of their neighborhoods and communities, the better they're going to do. And we've been seeing so many sites do this because people, they're ready. They're fatigued from this whole situation. They're ready to kind of come back, and we're going to be there with open arms.
Yeah, I said on a car wash broadcast a while ago, there's 100% of the people in our country. There's 15% that won't leave their house, and there's 15% that are out there, licking things, if you will, the extreme to say we're not going to worry about this thing.
Absolutely.
And then there's 70% of us in the middle, and those 70% of the people are going to decide, I think, what we do over time, and I think you see that on that right side. It's been an amazing swing, right? Everything was green at the beginning, or blue at
Oh,
the beginning. I'm sorry, green at the beginning, and then it was blue, and it was negative, and now it's come positive again. Hopefully, it comes out a united front for car washing and for every other area of our life. Pretty telling stuff. Let's talk for a second about what's coming. You guys have been making predictions. You made the one about, I believe it was Maryland, quite well last week. Any predictions this week, Jason or Chris?
I think that the big question is, is the new normal the same as last year's normal? And I think what we're starting to see is that the gap is a lot closer than we thought it was going to be. I mean, coming into this, when we would get asked, I would say, I would expect the third and fourth quarter of the year to be, 10 to 15% down volume wise compared to 2019. And really the numbers coming into 2020, we were about, if you take out the first week, we're about 7.5% above, projected to do above what we did in 2019. So 10 to 15% is really around 22%, 23%. Now, definitely more positive. I believe that we'll be somewhere around 6 to 10% down. Still a little bit of a volume dip. Now, this is all sites in aggregate, not just Express Exterior, but Express, Full Service, Flex. So, I think that's still really positive considering what we just went through. But 2 months of ridiculously low volume is still, we got to figure out a way to overcome that. And so what we're doing with our clients at SUDS is we're trying to make up that gap in ticket average and capture rate and things like that. So that's my prediction, is that we're going to have weeks where we go above what we did in 2019, and we're going to have weeks where we're below. But I think when you look at this thing at the end of the day, we're going to be somewhere around 5, 6 to 10% down from where we were in 2019 for the back half of the year, but still positive considering what we just came through.
Well, the really encouraging thing is, with the right efforts, the right leverage being pulled on the marketing side, it can still be an up revenue year, right?
Right.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Chris, any thoughts?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jason and I, obviously we talk a lot about this stuff. And for next week, much like we did a couple weeks ago, I'm going to take the states that are in new territory, that are above where they were last year, and we're going to build some forecasting tools around them. Because obviously the game has been so far just to get back up to parity. And so you kind of knew what that top line threshold was. But when you're in new territory, a very important thing for any business is to know what is realistic, what's probable. Where should we set our goals and targets? Because as many business owners are coming out of this, just writing a number down and saying, well, that's our goal for this year. Bad goals can be just as damaging psychologically and financially as anything else. So how do you dial that in, and what are these new thresholds? So I'm excited to dig into that, because we're seeing things and hearing stories every day. Jason and I heard a story yesterday about a brand new opening hitting numbers that I guess from the outside looking in that people shouldn't be hitting, but they are. So, there's a lot of potential out there, and it's our job to just refine that and bring those tactics to the table.
Yeah, it's really exciting hearing some stories about folks in the states that have really come out of this, that have the ability already to have more fast pass play members or higher ticket averages and things like that. So we look forward to that, and that'll be in next week's DataBytes. And really appreciate you guys' time on this and the energy. And we'll see everybody next week. Don't forget, our brand promise at DRB is really 2 big points. First of all, we're as passionate about car washing as you are. And the other one is, we sweat your assets, in that you made a huge investment in your car wash. We're trying to do everything in our power to understand the data to help you get that out of your car wash. Everybody have a great, safe week. Thanks.